total. Previously on Animation Fascination, we talked about episode 3. It was called Fire Made Flash, and we found out that Gray was the clone. Now this week, we're talking about Jubilee in the video game. So this is not working out the way I wanted. It's lagging too much. Oh well. But now it's ending, and now we're going into the episode here, and nobody's watching this part anyway right now. So here we go. Yeah, I don't know. There's a huge lag there that time, so whatever. Anyways, we are back for another Saturday morning installment of Animation Fascination, talking about X-Men 97. And then this week's was Motendo / Lifedeath Part 1. It was the 4th episode of Season 1 of X-Men 97. And what did you think, Stanford?
So, interesting format from the other three, and that they had two storylines, or whatever you call it, kind of two parts to it. So first off, I enjoyed them both quite different in tone and content, and also of course focusing on different characters. First one, Motendo with Jubilee and Roberto, was so cool. Here, you got it's such a, I thought it's such a great homage to X-Men video games.
Yeah.
And then just kind of video gaming in general. And then the Life Death one, was focusing on the Storm storyline, Storm and Forge, and anyway, pretty dramatic. I enjoyed it. Really enjoyed them both. What did you think?
Yeah, I really enjoyed these as well too. There's like scenes specifically, like if people are watching the video version of this, when when they're like in the video game with Jubilee and Sunspot, when they're in there, and it like goes essentially into like that 16-bit, like it like reminds you of the arcade games for it. Like Jubilee even wanted to go to the arcade for her 18th birthday to play some video games,
which I really loved.
Yeah, which I would that would have been amazing to see Magneto in that like a 90s version of a video game arcade, just like a video game like cabinet there, just like, I don't know, or even just like standing away, just using the joystick with like his magnetic powers and whatnot. It'd be kind of funny. But yeah, I really enjoyed these, and one of the things I put in my notes too is that I don't recall ever in the 90s series that if they did it, but what I kind of like, I remembered at least when I was a kid, with like a lot of like cartoons would do like within that 30-minute or 22 minutes with commercials, they would have like the two like 11-minute vignette episodes within that whole runtime, and I don't think X-Men ever did that before, back like when the first 5 seasons aired. So it was kind of neat to see them kind of play around with doing that with this episode, where you had the Jubilee birthday storyline for that first kind of vignette, and then you had the Forge and Storm vignette storyline, which is also then a part 1 of one. We'll get a part 2,
as we know, there's going to be a part 2
episodes down.
Yeah,
but yeah, I think I had a lot of fun with both of these. I guess less fun with the Storm one, just because it's not meant to be fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, like one of the things that was great about this too was in the like the Motendo game consoles. It's supposed to be like a parody of the Nintendo games console, but I thought it was kind of drawn a little bit more to look like the Sega Genesis, which was
Yeah, that's a good point.
and then like even like the opening logo, like when it opens, looks a little bit more like a little bit, well, kind of little. It's like a mix of like the Nintendo and Sega Genesis logo, I guess. Uh, but there's a lot of good little Easter eggs in this in like that first episode too, because he had because it's supposed to be like referring back to like all of like the Jubilee, calling it like the glory days more or less of like key and classic episodes from like the first 5 seasons run. So you had like stuff that was inferred for like Days of Future Past in there. You had scenes from like there's the whole storyline of like the prisoner island nation of Geonosia turned it like with them being turned into slaves with other mutants there with like Jubilee, Storm, and Gambit. Uh, like what did you think about some of like the stuff that was kind of like peppered in to like this first
Well,
Jubilee?
I thought it was cool, and impressive, and then also I was also kind of feeling like, dang, like I wish I could like point them all out, but I don't feel like truth be told,
Yeah,
I'm knowledgeable enough to be able to pinpoint it because I just thought I bet this thing is absolutely loaded with stuff, that I
yeah,
don't know, or somebody smarter than I am would have to point them out.
yeah. I just remember a lot of like there was a roller. Yeah, definitely take it back to the '90s. There was like a roller skating rink back in the '90s when I was like in elementary school. That um, there, like they had the main skating rink, and then like off to the side when you came in was like where you got all the food with like pizza and stuff like that, and then where you could go put on your skates and stuff like that. There's like a few arcade machines over there, and the three that they had over there, there was like it's like a wrestling WWE, or it would have said WWF on it back in the '90s, um, and then there was like the Capcom versus X-Men one, and then I think the one other one I think was maybe like the Ninja Turtles, Turtles in Time, like arcade cabinet. So that
Nice,
they had a good selection of like the
nice choices.
classic kind of arcade systems there um, at that roller rink back in the '90s. So, giving you a little flashback to the
Yeah.
'90s there.
I remember. I mean, I didn't go to the arcade a lot at that point in my life, but I remember that X-Men console game, and
Oh
and also, I mean, how many X-Men, like video games were there? Mark, there were quite a few, right?
yeah, oh yeah,
And so, uh, again, not that I really ever played them, but I was at least familiar with them, and so that was just I just loved the visual representation that they did in the episode, of
yeah.
these 8-bit
I think the one specifically in this one that it kind
figures.
of like visually supposed to be like representative of is the like the Konami X-Men arcade game. So
Okay,
like even like the cabinet that it makes like appearance like near
yeah,
like at the final boss fight with
yeah,
Mojo, like, looks like that. Um, and I thought there's nice little like hints and like allusions to both like the Matrix in this too. I thought it was fun. It was like when Jubilee uh, and such about like pick up the phone, like when they're in there and it like basically transports them, and it even like does it in the same way as the Matrix does
yeah.
with like
It's
that.
super clever. Yeah.
So there's like nice allusions to Tron a little bit in there
Yes.
too.
So there's some
Uh,
Tron stuff.
another
Absolutely.
another Disney property.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know. I like some of the people that are watching with us, like Shiny Plastic people said that he was kind of disappointed that the story was only a short bit of. I can see that too because I would have also liked like maybe this has its own full episode, like full
Oh,
30-minute episode,
absolutely.
and
Yeah.
then the Storm storyline gets its full 30-minute episode. Maybe maybe I don't know. The only thing I can think of is there maybe like they didn't think they had enough to fill out that full 30-minute time frame, and then they didn't want to make two shorter kind of things there, or they didn't want to make like the life death part one and part two as just like one very long episode.
Yeah.
But that's the only thing I can think of as far as that. But the other, speaking of the '90s stuff too, is the other thing that kind of that Mojo, at least in this episode, reminded me of was, do you remember Freakazoid? The
Yeah. Oh yeah.
kind of like if Freakazoid had not been a superhero within his TV show, if they had been like a villain instead, I could see Mojo essentially being
Mojo,
a villain version of
a
Freakazoid.
Freakazoid. That's a really good point. Yeah.
Even like the kind of visual design of the characters are kind of similar enough, especially with Mojo in this. How it's supposed to be like a Mojo that like lost weight because he hasn't like had like because that's basically like how he gets sustenance is from doing like these games and whatnot with like the like, putting them into servitude and whatnot. So because he had that for so long, that's why he's slimmed it down so much. And like one of the other things I liked about this too is that you had that older Jubilee that shows up in here too. Which the cool thing about that is that Alison Court, the original voice of Jubilee from the '90s series, voices the digital clone of the older version of Jubilee.
Yeah, that's cool.
In this too, so I thought that was like a nice nod, and then like makes sense for her voice to sound a little bit older there too, because she is.
Yeah, the character's older. I really like that.
And like I know in the comics, like basically like this older version of Jubilee is, I don't know if I ever pronounced the name right. It's like Absissa. It's like really weird spelling. It's like
Absissa. Yeah,
but like she's kind of kidnapped by Mojo, and like in a different but similar way to be like forced to be a servant. Like in this, that's kind of done that way where like he's like made basically like these digital clones of Sunspot and Jubilee to kind of like beta test doing this before.
Yeah.
But like she figured out like this whole like kind of glitch in a way that she could hack it more or less to stay alive until I don't know if this is happy or sad, because like when Jubilee like wins the game at the end, she kind of just like dereses. So I don't know if that's necessarily like a happy like ending for that digital clone, other than maybe I guess she's just like free at that point. But I liked how like her whole like layer was like all of like these kind of like digital like makeups or of like the different like X-Men characters. So you have like a Wolverine and a Gambit in there, and they almost look like they were like 8-bit versions of the characters that were like stretched out beyond like what the resolution should have been, so that they were like all weirdly distorted a little bit in there.
Interesting choice. I liked it.
Yeah. And then there's always like kind of that classic thing too, where like a character that has powers within something, like sometimes they'll meet like an older version of themselves, and like their older version like has like mastered like all these new ways of like using their powers, and Jubilee's like, oh wait, I can do that. She's like, yeah, you haven't seen anything yet. So I'm assuming that's maybe like a little wink nod, be like, you're gonna see Jubilee do more than just shoot firework jubilations out of her fingertips. Like she'll be able to do like a little bit more evolved version of that. Maybe by the end of this season we'll see. But that should be interesting, I think, with that. Was there anything else that kind of stood out to you with like in this first part of this one at all?
Mark, one of the things that cracked me up is, so I've been just watching these episodes on my own, without any other thing, and then sometimes I'll watch a reaction video afterwards too. And we've talked about this offline, but I love Heroes Reforged reaction videos. I think they're my they're some of my favorite content creators, and they I love their response about Mojo because I think universally all three of them like hate, like, couldn't stand Mojo from the OG series,
Oh
and
yeah.
to have them come back, their reaction cracked me up. Uh, I don't have the history, but Mojo is pretty heinous villain. Uh, I guess that was the one thing I was glad for how this episode was a little shorter. Although I would have been very happy if they had been long, a full episode in this
Oh
story.
yeah.
But we didn't have just a ton of Mojo. So anyway, that made me laugh.
Yeah, and I don't believe it's he did the actor who did it in this. I don't believe it's the same Mojo from the original '90s series because it was David Reggio Jr. in this one, um, and he's done stuff more recently, like in like that newer Tiny Toons animated series where he's in the voice of
Okay.
Plucky Duck and Hampton J Pig. He was also Ferb on Phineas and Ferb.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so, so you know he got a lot of speaking to do as Ferb
Yeah.
on Phineas and Ferb for fans of Phineas and Ferb,
So, Mark,
which
what about?
Phineas and Ferb did have a Marvel crossover at one point.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah,
So now if they ever do that again, you could have Mojo talk to Ferb,
Mojo.
I guess.
Mark, what's your take on Spiral too? So, uh,
Oh yeah,
I,
like how there's like yeah, like how she kind of shows up like a little bit and is helping Jubilee a
yeah,
tiny
she
bit in
helps
this, and then you see
Jubilee.
she kind of like disappears. And she was in like those like the Mojo episodes from like the original '90s series too. Um, yes, I don't know if it seems like maybe she'll show up again then too, because I don't think they don't even like Mojo makes like a reference to her about someone like helping or like cheating or something like that.
Yeah.
But I don't I don't believe he ever actually sees her within it, and
No, I
like
don't think
I
it
believe
seems
only
like
like the
we didn't
audience
see
does.
her. Yeah, that only the audience can see what she's doing and how she's able to, send them back into the real world, right?
Yeah, so I'll be curious to see like what may come from that. Um, the and then like speaking of like stuff from like the Mojo appearances from like the '90s series too, you can see um, next to the Motendo console, there's like a stuffed long shot uh, character from the like that Mojo was basically like he was like his champion like within before like he brought the X-Men in there, so it was like a nice little nod to that there too. Um, but like the one other thing that I enjoyed about like the Jubilee part of this too is like since Jubilee understands like the mechanics of video games so much, so, like she knew how to beat that like video game avatar version of Magneto
Yeah,
within there too, and then that way you kind of got a classic, uh, still evil Magneto within the episode, like with like full helmet,
yeah,
fully sleeved, uh, yeah, like no like showing his biceps Magneto. Um, but yeah, I enjoyed this first part of it, and then I thought it was interesting then like how it then like, segued within to the storm portion of the episode that we had there after that, which is kind of cool too. It was like and then just like shows the title on that because it almost would have been funny because uh, like with on the show Invincible, they kind of play around where they just kind of like randomly place in like the opening and end credits to kind of make you presume like the episode is done at a certain point. Like there's quick side tangent. Like there's an episode in like the first half of the season two where like in the middle of the episode, kind of the same way that they did with this, is like that episode's kind of split into the reference point of two different characters in it. So like in the middle of the episode, they did like the produced by Robert Kirkman like in there, and then it cuts just to the other half of the episode. It doesn't have like another title or anything. It's just like they randomly placed like a little bit of the closing credits in the middle of the episode, just to kind of make you think, oh, the episode's done. But no, it's not.
psych. It's not.
Yeah. Uh, so what did you think about this storm portion
Well,
of the episode?
I think we've been I mean, we're only 4 episodes in, right? But
Yeah.
clearly, with the things, waiting to find out what happened to Storm and how she's going to get her powers back. I personally don't think it's a matter of if. I think it's a matter of when.
Yeah.
Um, and then just the interesting stuff that went on with this, and the Forge expressing his feelings for her as well, and then the adversary shows up, and that I wasn't sure what to expect, but it wasn't that.
Huge freaky looking owl.
Oh, freaky. So both Storm and Forge are kind of messed up, right? Because of that. So anyway,
Yeah.
another left with another cliffhanger, but I liked it. Again, really interesting tone shift with it, because the first episode is really much lighter,
Yeah.
thing, and then we get into this more interesting. But again, it worked for me, and I should comment too. Just a kudos to the animators. Then I think again, just both episodes were different, but wasn't the animation just fantastic again
Yeah. It's
in this whole episode?
it's like close enough to what it looked like on the '90s series while still being distinct
Yep.
and updated enough to feel like its own thing. Like you could feel like where there's like TV shows that ran during the period of, like where television transitioned from the 4:3 standard definition to the 16:9 uh, high definition series. So like if for like case in point for like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, like you can see that like if you go watch older seasons, like it's still that 4:3 there. It's kind of like with and then like newer seasons, they're HD 16:9.
Yeah.
With this, it almost makes it feel even more like a continuation, where it's just like the series, just in between season 5 and then I guess X-Men '97 would be like season 6. It had that transition in television from the 4:3 standard definition to 16:9 high definition, and then it kind of just fits with how it like somewhat like upgraded its animation to fit that new like format of video technology between those two times. So
Yeah.
I've been enjoying that, and then like some of like the notes that I had outside of the freaky huge owls in that. I thought it was interesting that Forge had also essentially, I guess, made that gun that the X Dash Kushner
Yeah.
used to take away Storm's powers. So it's almost like the Forge felt guilty, essentially, for being essential, I guess, tangentially like a part of that happening to her.
Yeah.
But yeah, I liked how like like that part of the episode, it was like they were both good like character building segments for both Jubilee as well as Storm, where you're getting a little bit more character development for both of them, for like where their like mindset is at like within this time point for both of them. And like Jubilee's feeling kind of like restricted there too, or um but like she's, it's not now that she's becoming 18, like she's feeling more of like an adult and is like more of a integral part of the team than maybe even more so than she had been in the past. And then Storm is kind of just feeling still kind of basically grieving like the loss of her powers, and trying to like deal with that in like different ways. And like she like goes through like that whole thing with um, Forge of essentially kind of sort of going through, I don't know if you'd call it like a ritual, or like to try to get her powers back, and then they don't. And then the big freaky owl shows up, the adversary, there at the end. So, what did you kind of think about that, as far as like how we got this little bit more character development between Jubilee like in her vignette, and then Storm in her piece here.
Well, again, that's one of my favorite things. And we've talked about this too. We'll probably talk about it again. But one of my favorite things about X-Men are these relationships they have with each other, and on these different levels. Friendships, colleagues, frenemies, enemies. Lovers, all the stuff. And so that to me was just very interesting. Both. Jubilee, I think, took a step towards maturity in her, in her storyline, her character arc, and also, clearly, and the bond solidified between her and Roberto, right?
Yeah,
And then I just thought, yes, Forge, Forge has this troubled past, right? And he's so I think he's such an interesting character, and then clearly we're all rooting for Storm, to try to get her powers back. I think it just works on so many levels. The writing, I think, the writing is really good. Plus, I just these are characters that we all know and like a lot.
yeah. Um, and so like I guess kind of rounding out for this one too is that I guess if you had to choose which part of the episode you liked more, like we had Gustavo in here earlier say that they liked
Yeah,
the Jubilee part, that they really loved it, not to take away from the Storm story, but like if you, and again, this won't choose. This isn't saying one is worse than the other or
yeah.
one. Which one did you just like, or which one was your favorite out of the two
Well, I
vignettes
think
that
that
you
the
had this week?
Jubilee one is my favorite, just because the joy of how they did the video game
Yeah,
homage was just pure fun, Uh, the storm episode was also very, very good and dramatic. So, but I think I like the video game one better if I had to choose. But they both were great, I think, in their own lane, their own way.
yeah. I think the way to kind of contextualize it too is like the Storm vignette part of it kind of felt more in line with like more classic episodes
Yes.
of X Men, whereas like the Jubilee one almost, it feels like one of those, not like very special episode like 80s very special episodes, but like like if people watch Community, like they would do like an episode
Yeah.
where like all of the characters were like Muppets in an episode, or
Yeah.
there was an episode where they were all in a video game. Which when I remembered hearing about like the idea of this episode, I think we talked about it in the
We
last
did.
episode. I really hoped that like this episode would essentially be like what
Like
that Community
like
episode was,
community. Yeah.
and it kind of sort of was. The Community one definitely leaned way more into it, like being that animation for like 90% of the episode for that show. Uh, but I guess when your show's already animated, it's kind of a little bit hard to differentiate that. But I think it would have been cool to just see it done like that entire episode in that kind of like 16-bit
Yeah. Yeah.
arcade style of. But maybe that would have been hard to animate like an entire episode being side scrolling like that. But again, they did do that in Community too. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. But like next week's episode is going to be called Remember It. And the synopsis for that one is: as Geonosius prepares to join the UN, select members of the team head to the island nation to be honorees. Back at the mansion, a behind-the-scenes press event risks airing the X-Men's dirty laundry. So we kind of got a hint of that in this one too, because Jubilee talks about Jean and Scott being off at the UN. So I'm assuming we're going to see Scott and
Yeah.
and of note there too is that Jean was updated in the opening credits this week. So now it's the non-clone Jean. So I guess this is the way you differentiate them. Non-clone Jean has her hair up, kind of like in
Yeah.
the I don't the like the
Yeah.
half cowl that she has, the similar to like
Mhm.
how Gambit kind of has one of those too.
Yeah.
Um, so that it's kind of fun to like note they've also add like little different scene and vignettes into these, like the opening each week, depending on like what the episode is about too. So it's keep an eye on that, like when you're watching it too, because there's like a little thing in there too with like Jubilee and Mojo from like an updated version of it, but it was meant to have been from like the episode in the 90s. So if you watch through that, you'll see like these little allusions to things that you might see later on in the episode that you're going to watch too. So I thought that was interesting. But yeah, was there anything else you wanted to say about either of these two episodes before we wrap up for this week, Stanford?
I just enjoyed them, Mark. It's always fun to talk with you about them, and I'm excited already for next week. Sure,
Oh, yeah.
next week's episode. I think it's gonna be really an interesting one.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to that. This whole show so far has been really good, and I think once we get to next week, that's about halfway through. It's not exactly halfway through, but because I think there's 11 episodes.
Yeah,
But like that, the last three are all like a three-parter. So I guess as far as like individualistic, episodic episodes, I guess you'd maybe already say that we're halfway
yeah,
through,
yeah.
which is kind of crazy. Um, but yeah, for Animation Fascination, you can find our website at animationfascination.net. And then you can find Stanford and I on just by looking up our names on all social media, different places there. Then Animation Fascinations on social media as well. You can usually find us by looking for either Animation Fascination or at Animated Podcast. And then we also have a Patreon if you want to check that out as well. It's just patreon.com/Animation Fascination. But so I'm Mark Vibert. So for myself and my friend Professor Clark over here, we will bid you all adieu this week as the music starts to play. So, bye everybody.